The B-26 Marauder is remembered as a significant aircraft in World War II aviation history. Its speed and range made it an effective bomber for deep strike missions, and its use in a variety of roles demonstrated its versatility. Despite its early reputation for being difficult to fly, the B-26 ultimately proved to be a reliable and effective aircraft that played an important role in the Allied victory. Who was the mastermind behind the creation of this war machine? How good was the technology used in this machine? The Martin B-26 Marauder was a twin-engine medium bomber used by the United States Army Air Forces during World War II. It was designed to replace the earlier B-18 and B-25 bombers, and its first flight took place on November 25, 1940. It was known for its speed and agility, but also for its high accident rate during the early stages of its use. Despite these initial difficulties, the B-26 went on to become a highly effective bomber, particularly in the European theater of the war. It was used in a variety of missions, including precision bombing of enemy targets, close air support for ground troops, and even as a night fighter. The B-26 Marauder was designed by Glenn L. Martin Company in response to a 1939 request from the U.S. Army Air Corps for a new medium bomber. The design featured a streamlined fuselage, a high wing with a narrow chord, and an emphasis on speed and range. It was also one of the first American bombers to be equipped with a tricycle landing gear. A monoplane with shoulder wings and tricycle landing gear, the B-26 was made entirely of metal. The crew was housed in a sleek, circular section fuselage that contained a bombardier in the nose with a 30-inch machine gun, a pilot and co-pilot sitting next to each other, and places for the radio operator and navigator behind the pilots. The first powered dorsal turret to be installed on a U.S. bomber was manned by a gunner and equipped with two 50-inch machine guns. An additional 30-inch machine gun was installed in the tail. Two bomb bays were fitted mid-fuselage, capable of carrying 5,800 pounds of bombs, although in practice, such a bomb load reduced range too much, and the aft bomb bay was usually fitted with additional fuel tanks instead of bombs. Two Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engines housed in nacelles mounted beneath the wings propelled the aircraft with four-bladed propellers. The Ford Dearborn Engine Facility in Dearborn, Michigan produced the engines. The B-26 had a crew of 7, including a pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, and 3 gunners. The crew was housed in a cramped, narrow cockpit that was prone to overheating and required the use of oxygen masks at high altitudes. The B-26 Marauder had a top speed of over 300 miles per hour and a range of around 1,300 miles. Its high speed and long range made it an ideal bomber for use in the European theater, where it could fly deep into enemy territory and deliver precision strikes against strategic targets. Due to the B-26's short wing area and high wing loading, a fast landing speed of 120 to 135 miles per hour indicated airspeed was necessary depending on load. William K. Ken Ebel, a Martin test pilot, piloted the first B-26, which was essentially the prototype, in its first flight on November 25, 1940. Deliveries of the second aircraft, 40-1362, to the U.S. Army Air Corps started in February 1941. At Patterson Field, close to Dayton, Ohio, the Army Air Corps began the B-26's Accelerated Service Testing Program in March 1941. A total of 5,288 were produced between February 1941 and March 1945. 522 of these were flown by the Royal Air Force and the South African Air Force. All Martin B-26s had been retired from U.S. service by the time the U.S. Air Force was established as a separate military branch from the U.S. Army in 1947. The unrelated Douglas A-26 Invader took on the B-26 designation after the Marauder was withdrawn, which caused confusion between the two aircraft. The B-26 Marauder had several variants during its service life. The B-26A was the initial production model and was used for training and anti-submarine patrols. The B-26B was the most common model and was used for bombing missions. The B-26C was a variant with a modified nose that housed a radar system for use in night missions. The B-26D was a variant with improved engines and increased fuel capacity for longer-range missions. The B-26 Marauder saw action in several major campaigns during World War II, including the North African, Mediterranean, and European theaters. It was used in a variety of roles, including precision bombing, interdiction missions, and close air support for ground troops. One of its most notable missions was the bombing of the Ploiești oil refineries in Romania in August 1943, which was one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe. Did you know about the funny nickname B-26 had? The B-26 Marauder had a reputation as a difficult and dangerous aircraft to fly, particularly during its early years of service. It was prone to stall and spin during takeoff and landing, leading to a high accident rate. This led to the aircraft being dubbed the Widowmaker by some of its crews. However, improvements in pilot training and modifications to the aircraft's design helped to reduce the accident rate over time. Some of the very first B-26s experienced nose landing gear breakdowns. Although it is claimed that poor weight distribution was the main factor in their occurrence, this is not necessarily the case. The problems happened during takeoffs and landings, low-speed taxiing, and on occasion, the strut unlocked. Some of the original B-26s later had the Martin electric dorsal turret retrofitted. In 1941, Martin also started testing a higher vertical stabilizer and changed the position of the tail gunner. Although the Curtiss electric pitch change mechanism in the propellers required meticulous maintenance, it was not always possible to perform it in the field. The Pratt & Whitney R2805 engines were dependable. An overspeeding propeller, also referred to as a runaway prop, can occur occasionally as a result of human mistake and some mechanical faults. This was especially scary for air crews because of the noise and the potential for the propeller blades to break off. The difficulty came from one engine losing power upon takeoff. Numerous aircraft were destroyed as a result of these and other problems, human error, and other factors, including Colonel Mark Lewis, commanding commander of the 22nd Bombardment Group. The US AAF and Martin took the unusual step during the war of commissioning lengthy articles to be placed in a variety of popular publications to educate the public and defend the flying accident record of the B-26 against slanders in 1944, in response to numerous pilots complaining to the press and their relatives back home. The Popular Mechanics issue for May 1944 contained one of these lengthy essays. In addition to the Widowmaker, B-26 Marauder had other nicknames, including the Flying Prostitute, due to its reputation for being hot and difficult to handle, and the Baltimore Whore, due to its manufacturer, Glenn L. Martin, being based in Baltimore. The B-26 Marauder was used extensively by the US AAF during World War II, particularly in the European theater. It was also used in smaller numbers in the Pacific theater, where it was used for reconnaissance and anti-shipping missions. After the war, the B-26 was used by several other air forces around the world, including the French Air Force during the Indochina War and the Algerian War. According to the 9th Air Force, all of U.S. aircraft employed throughout the conflict, the B-26 had the lowest combat loss rate. Nevertheless, throughout its military history, it remained a difficult aircraft to operate and was nevertheless despised by some of its pilots. After World War II, many B-26 Marauders were sold to foreign air forces, including those of France, Brazil, and Guatemala. Some were also used for civilian purposes, such as aerial surveying and firefighting. Despite its early reputation for being difficult to fly, the B-26 Marauder was highly respected by its crews and earned several accolades during its service life. It was credited with sinking or damaging several enemy ships, and it was also used in support of ground troops during the D-Day invasion and other major campaigns. Today, there are only a few surviving examples of the B-26 Marauder. One of the most well-known is Flak Bait, which flew over 200 missions during World War II and is now on display at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. In addition to Flak Bait and the example at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, there are several other surviving B-26 Marauders scattered around the world. These include examples at the Imperial War Museum in Duxford, England, and the Museo Nacional de Aeronautica in Argentina. The B-26 Marauder has been featured in several movies and TV shows over the years. One of the most famous is the 1962 movie The War Lover, which starred Steve McQueen as a B-17 pilot but prominently featured a B-26 as well. The B-26 is also being featured in various video games, including the popular flight simulator game Microsoft Flight Simulator. Do you think the B-26 Marauder can go through the air defenses of the present times? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.